Hello everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another video. My name is Diego and I know it's been a while since you've seen me, if you've ever seen me, but today I'm going to show you how to breed crested geckos from scratch to end incubating eggs and hatching crested geckos. So if you want to know how to do this, I'll give you all the information that you need in this video. Stay here, watch it, and you'll understand how to breed a crested gecko. So I've divided this video in 5 sections. So there are going to be things that you need to know before you have the crested geckos, things that you need to know about care for the crested geckos when breeding, things that you need to know about the routines you need for the crested geckos, and then we have egg care and hatchling care. So without further ado, let's dive into the first one of these 5 sections. When it comes to things that you need to know before having crested geckos as a breeding project, there's not a lot of things that you need to know, but there are important things that you should definitely try to know. First one is genetics. I've made a couple of videos about genetics and it is really important that you know crested gecko genetics. You might be asking why. If I like 2 geckos, I'm gonna pair them up together and make some cool babies, right? Well, it's not always like that. For example, if you like red geckos and you like yellow geckos, when you pair them up together, a lot of the times you get some really muddy colors. Maybe you were expecting to make something really cool, like, I don't know, maybe pink geckos or some really cool yellows or some really cool reds. But the reality is that usually you're gonna get muddy colored geckos. Now I'm not hating on muddy colored geckos, but it is something that you would probably not expect from that pairing. Therefore, it is important that you know crested gecko genetics and then how some traits are inherited, how some phenotypes are obtained, and etc. The next thing you're gonna need to know is health, diseases, and etc., which I've also made a video about and it is in my channel. I go over some health implications and stuff that might happen to your gecko, but what I'm talking about here more is about how to keep your gecko healthy during breeding. So you want your geckos to start off at around 40, 45, if more the better. I would not go over the 50 or 55 gram mark because usually that is a bigger gecko. As long as the gecko looks healthy overall, it doesn't matter at what gram size they are or weight. But if you have a gecko that is maybe this big and is like 90 grams, then you probably have an obese gecko. And although you might not notice short-term health implications or might develop some other diseases, obesity is not just a health implication in humans, it is also a health implication in a lot of animals. And it's also similar for skinny geckos. I would not pair up a gecko that is under 35 grams. If a gecko is 35 grams and it looks healthy overall, you can definitely pair it up. People are really weird about the weight of crested geckos. I've had females go down to 30 grams while breeding and they're still super healthy and they look overall well and they're just laying. They will go down and then they will go right back up in the couple of months that you give them to recover. And this leads me to the third thing that you need to know before breeding. The breeding season starts whenever you want to start it and ends whenever you want to end it. Usually breeders do a start at December or January, or some even push it back to April, and then they usually end it in October, or depending on when you started it, it will end sooner or later. What I personally do is I start in December, January, and then end it in October. That's what I did last year, and I'm starting my season just now, so that's what I'm thinking I'm gonna do. But I know a lot of people that do this as well, and it works for them. The reason why you want the season to have an end and a start is because you want the females to be able to recover as well as the males so that they can produce more healthy offspring. It is not that important with the males because they're not the ones that are producing eggs and need that extra calcium to make those babies. But the females will need to have a lot of calcium and a lot of fat reserves in order to make some really healthy and chunky babies. The next thing I want to say is that you're gonna need to keep track of everything. So either keep a notebook or an Excel sheet or just some paper notes in the enclosures, but find a way in which you are comfortable keeping track of things. It is really important to do so because you are going to be able to predict things in the future. For example, if I keep track of when this egg was laid, I'm gonna be able to more or less determine when that egg is gonna hatch. And I do that not only by knowing the thing that you will find on internet by saying they usually hatch from 60 to 120 days and it depends on the temperature and blah blah blah. I do that also by tracking my temperature and how many days it takes for those eggs to hatch at those different temperatures. And you'll find that the eggs from different females also tend to hatch at slightly different amount of days than the eggs from different females. I don't know why that happens, but it is interesting, and that might be something that you might want to keep track of. Now, when it comes to eggs, you just don't want to be impatient at all. You don't want to really cut any eggs open at all, and you don't want to mess with them that much. Crested gecko eggs are really hardy, but once they are broken or the outer membrane of the egg, the eggshell, is broken and open, there is not much you can do. There are some ways to seal it back up, but if the opening is really big, then there's nothing you can do. So don't cut open any eggs. Feel free to candle pretty much as you want. Some people say that if you candle in the later days, there are things that can go wrong. I've never had any issues with candling in the later days of development. I think it might be true for other species, but I think people underestimate the power and the resilience of crested geckos, including their eggs. So feel free to candle. It is a good way of knowing how the gecko is doing inside of the egg without altering or damaging the egg at all. And finally, I want to say before you buy any geckos, try to avoid the lower quality geckos. And I say lower quality because there's a lot of really cool geckos that are not that typical, because maybe they don't have that crazy body and head structure and they don't have that crazy pattern and crazy colors. But sometimes there are geckos that are lower quality that you might benefit off because of other reasons. For example, I have geckos from a breeding pair that is not the best phenotypically, but genetically they are really food driven. So I might want to pair those geckos up to other geckos that are slower at eating, they don't grow that fast, or they're more picky, and therefore I can make geckos that are better eaters and in the future will give me less problem. Now I'm probably gonna make a video talking about how there is no such thing as a pet quality gecko, it's just what you like, but there are certain things that you might want to avoid. General rule is a lot of people don't like the thin heads, so if you're gonna create a lot of babies with thin heads, you're not gonna be able to sell them as well as babies with bigger heads. Therefore, you might end up with a lot of babies that people don't want to buy. You have to choose between bigger heads and smaller heads. Go for bigger heads because they're going to sell better, they're going to be able to find more homes. But that's just an example. There's geckos with really crazy things going on and might be considered pet quality for some reason. If you have a gecko that you like, breed it and make geckos that you like. However, if you paid like $100 for that gecko, don't expect to sell the babies for $500. Unless it's like something crazy and you get a really good deal and you know what you're talking about. But if you go to a pet store and you buy, let's say, a Harlequin with 10-15 Dalmatian spots, which would not make it a nice visual Dalmatian. Also, it's a Harlequin, so the Dalmatian spots can't be seen through, and it has a poor head structure, and the colors are really simple, like a black base and a muted orange patterning. Then don't expect to sell babies from that parent for $500 or something like that. Expect to sell the babies for what you paid. Now let's go into care. When it comes to care, crested geckos are really easy and they can thrive in a lot of conditions. The way that we keep our crested geckos is in tubs that are properly ventilated, and we keep the humidity in pretty well. Now tubs have some benefits over glass enclosures, but the biggest downside is the size. You can't have an 18 by 18 by 36 vertical tub. It's just, I mean, you can probably make one yourself, but there's not a lot of them available at your Walmart, Target, or Kroger, or wherever you buy your tubs. However, the average tub size that people use for adults is a 64 quart tub. What I usually do is I just grab the lid and I make a square in the middle, cut out that square, and I put some mesh. You can buy that mesh on Amazon. It's really cheap if you buy it in bulk. It's like $8 for a lot. Like, it lasts me probably half a year for those $8. And I do a lot of things with that mesh. I even do the bioactive enclosures. I do the baby bins, ventilations, etc. So it's really not that expensive. And that's also one of the cons. Tubs are really cheap compared to a glass tank that maybe for a small 12 by 12 by 18 you might be spending $80. For $80 you can probably buy like 10 tubs. So if you're not picky when it comes to how it looks, you probably want to go for a tub because it is cheaper and you can also retain humidity way better. Now this also comes with a downside. The more humidity in the container that is staying there and is stagnant, is the more mold and bacteria that are going to build up, so the more cleaning. Another pro of the tubs is that they're easier to clean since they're lighter weight, so you can just wipe them down with some vinegar or something and they're really easy to clean. What the tub needs to contain is obviously some hides, climbing spaces, a water bowl, and a moss hide or humid hide or lay box, which are essentially the same thing. The moss hide, humid hide, lay box can serve for several purposes. If the male or female have any issues when it comes to shedding, they can go in there and have that skin become more soft thanks to the humidity that is retained by the moss. If the female needs to lay, she will probably go there instead of laying just wherever. Sometimes I do it though, but she will probably, preferably, go to the lay box, which can be either moss or cocoa husk, and she will burrow and lay eggs at the very bottom. That's why you want your lay box to be preferably a clear plastic, because when she goes down, you will be able to lift it up and see if there's eggs or not. When it comes to routine, you need to be able to learn your gecko's behavior and what they look like on average. For example, instead of checking for eggs every single day, what I do is I feel my females. So I grab a female and I feel her for eggs. This is really easy and I can show you real quick how to do it. I also show you guys in a video, I don't remember which one, I think it was either the one of laying eggs or maybe I did one separately, I don't remember. But I know I did a video about this with Ruby, and I think I'm going to show you guys her again because she is gravid now. She's going to lay anytime soon. So this is Ruby. She's one of my smaller females, and she is healthy though, and she's gravid. So the way to know is you simply put her in a position where she is comfortable, but you have a good grip. So I let her crawl over me, and then I put this finger here, and then I grab, okay? And now by simply bending a little bit, you're gonna feel the eggs. I can clearly feel the eggs in here. There are 2 big bumps. So just hold here, press down a little bit on the spine, and you will be able to feel the eggs with your hand that is holding her tight. So with this hand, I'm pushing here and feeling here. Pushing here and feeling here, okay? And it's really easy. Crested geckos lay 2 eggs, so there's gonna be 1 egg on each side. So you obviously feel 1 bump on each side normally. Some females are weird and they only lay 1 egg. Some females only lay 1 healthy egg. Some females lay 2 infertile eggs. Infertile eggs are usually smaller than the fertile eggs. So if you feel really small bumps, that might be it. Or maybe it's the egg developing. If you feel bumps that are not hard, the egg is developed and you might expect that egg to be laid in 2 or 3 weeks. I think that cleaning regularly is a good thing just because mold can build up and they can maybe become ill or something. I've never had the issue. I've definitely had a mold in my enclosures before and immediately when I see it, I remove it. But there's people out there that think that mold is going to kill your crested geckos immediately. I guess it depends on which kind of mold, but I've got mold a bunch of times and it's not that big of a deal. You obviously want to remove it immediately, but it's not going to kill your gecko immediately either. So don't think that mold is going to immediately kill your gecko, but definitely keep your enclosures clean. Now I feed Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I leave that 2-day gap between Saturday, Sunday until Monday so that they are more hungry and on Monday they eat more. I also try to feed crickets or live insects once a week. So for example, if you want to, you can feed the crickets on Monday. I think crickets fill them up more than the wet food. So if you want to feed crickets, maybe the best day to do it is the day that there's 2 days of not feeding before. So for example, if you do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, there's going to be 2 days that you didn't feed, which are Saturday and Sunday. And then on Monday, you can feed crickets because they're going to be more hungry and they're going to be able to fill their little bellies up a little bit more. And then also, I like to alternate food. So if you're going to buy Crested Gecko food and you have several geckos, you should probably buy different flavors just because you don't know what your gecko likes most. So alternate a little bit, get used to your gecko's flavor, and also give them that variety that is probably going to be good for their brain as a way of enrichment. Also, it's not going to be the same food every single day, which I bet they're going to get tired of it at some point. So I always change it. I don't think I've done the same food for more than 1 or 2 months straight. So try to change it up and give them that enrichment that they need. Now, I think this comes without saying though. Always check the lay box just in case. I wouldn't do it every single day because you're feeling the female. And if you have learned how to feel a female, you will not have to check the lay box every single day. I barely check my lay boxes anymore, maybe once a week. But just in case, check the lay boxes. Sometimes it's not that easy, especially if you have groups of 2 or 3 females. So check them. Now, the reason why I do groups of 2 or 3 females is because I've learned how to touch and how to feel them. If you know who is gravid and who isn't, and then let's say I have 3 females, one of them, or let's say even all of them are gravid, you know? So that would be a mess if I didn't know how to touch them. What I would do is I would touch all of them, and then the next day, I mean, it's weird that they will lay the same day. I've never had that happen. That's why with groups of more than 2 females, I would add an extra lay box. But you touch the females, you make sure that you know which one's gravid, which one has been developing that egg for the most time. And then when you see eggs, you touch them. I can almost 100% guarantee that if you have 3 gravid females, which is weird, they usually don't get gravid at the same time. If you have 3 gravid females, there's going to be 2 that didn't lay and 1 that did. So you touch the one that didn't lay. Also, she's going to look a little bit skinnier, probably like even 3 or 4 grams skinnier. So if you want to do like a scale method where you weight your gecko every single day instead of touching, that's okay as well. But a big poop or a big feeding can change that drastically. So I prefer touching them better. So yeah, understand your geckos, and you need to learn how they look and how they behave. Their behavior is really important as well. It will tell you a lot of things that you need to know when it comes to gecko care. And for example, if they look a little bit off, maybe you need to give them more food or more humidity, or you need to separate them. Another example is if 2 crested geckos are breeding and one of them is not doing great, you might want to separate them. Almost immediately, you will notice results where the gecko is eating properly, it's shedding properly, and you can have a more controlled environment for that gecko, rather than if it's with that other mate, and that mate might be stressing it. When eggs have been laid, you need to collect them immediately and start to keep track of them. So let's say that you have eggs that you wake up and you see there's eggs in there. What I would do is write down the day of the day that you saw it, not the day that you think they laid it. So the day you saw it, you write that down on an Excel sheet, or you even put it in some paper or something. I prefer Excel because I end up putting everything in there, and if I somehow damage the paper, then Excel will always be there. So I usually do both the paper and Excel, and then I also label the egg from the outside. So I like to keep track of things, honestly, but you only need to do one of them, you know? What I do for labeling is instead of labeling the egg directly, because I don't know how ink affects the embryo development. I know people say it's okay, but ink is kind of toxic, so I'm kind of scared of that. But instead of labeling the egg directly, I label the outside of a bead box that has been filled with small clay balls. So this is an example. These 2 from the bottom have not been labeled with the date, which I used to always put, and these are the first time that I didn't do it. I used to have this filled up, but it's the end of the season, so everyone's hatching now. But I'll make a video about the hatchlings that we've hatched in 2024. I think they're really cool, and I'm really excited to show you guys. But yeah, you don't need to label every single thing, but at least the name, because you want to know which one's which. So for example, I have Marmalade here. I used to have a bunch of Martas here. Ruby's just hatched yesterday. Well, Martas also hatched yesterday. And then these app codes that I have here, I have the date in the computer, but it's not in here. So as you can see, I have the name of the female and the date. And then I have those clay balls that are really good for keeping humidity properly. And also you can see when they are damp or wet and when they are dry. Let me open it again and show you the difference between wet and dry. I think you can tell already. These 2 are wet. Sorry, these 2 are dry. And the rest are wet. Now the substrate that I use for incubating are these clay chunks or balls or whatever. They are from Pangea. I think it's called Super Hatch. It's good, it's cheap, it's reusable. You can boil it, bake it, and then use it again once it's cooled down. So it's really nice. It's just balls of rocks, or not even balls, it's just chunks of rocks that retain humidity really well because they're porous. So it's easy. You can also tell when they are wet, when they are dry. And then finally, for egg care, I'm going to say temperature is really not that important. You don't need like a specific temperature. Do room temperature, but don't keep it too high. If you do more than 75, your geckos are going to hatch way too early and they might develop worse head structure. Also, the longer they stay in the egg is the less time and less food that you need to give them. Because the thing is, the more they stay in the egg, they're gonna be feeding off of that egg. I've had geckos hatch at more than 100 days, and they hatch bigger, but they still have some more yolk that can be absorbed. So if you want to incubate at like 67 maybe for the entire incubation period, you're gonna probably hatch geckos out at like 100 to 110 days, and they will have absorbed that yolk a little bit better. I've never hatched a gecko under 80 days, but they are clearly a little bit smaller and they are weaker when they hatch out of the egg. So I'd say 70, 71, maybe 69 even, are good temperatures for incubating crested gecko eggs. Now, it's really important for you to be patient. Things take time, and as I've said before, don't really cut any eggs open. If you do so, you're gonna end up having problems. I used to not know how long to expect. People said like 70 days, 75 days, and I was all the time candling, all the time looking at it, all the time super impatient, and that did no good. So be patient. If you want to know how to know when a gecko is ready to hatch, I'll give you a few things right now to tell you how to do so. I'll probably make a video in the future, but I'll tell you now real quick. A gecko is usually ready to hatch when you candle it, and you see a couple of things that I'm going to show you quick. I did this catch yesterday when I was talking to a previous customer, but I guess I can use it real quick. I'm not sure if you guys are going to understand this, but imagine the outer part is the eggshell, and then the dark spot in here is the nose. These are the eyes, and that's the tail, so this is the body of the gecko. When the nose is really, really close to the outer membrane or the shell, that's usually the gecko's gonna hatch soon. If you see like a fully formed gecko in there and the nose is really close to it, the gecko's gonna be ready to hatch soon. Now, another indicator that I'm not really sure about, but I've noticed, is when you candle in the later stages of the gecko development, the fluid part is not red anymore. During most of the time, the fluid part of the egg is gonna be more reddish, but during the last days of the incubation period, that fluid part is more of a light or a cream or a white color. So you're gonna be able to tell a bit when it's more ready to hatch if everything that you see is black, and then the little spaces in between that you see are not red and they're more of a whiter or a creamer color. And then finally, when it comes to baby or hatchling care, it's really easy. It's basically the same for an adult, but a smaller version. Crested gecko hatchlings are really hardy as well. So what we use are these tubs, these shoe racks. You can also use these bins, but make sure to add ventilation to it. So get like a circular drill thing and then drill a little bit hole, then cut out a bigger circle here with the mesh, and use silicone or hot glue to stick it there. I think for this thing it's way better to use hot glue because silicone's a little bit too messy and it gets everywhere. Of course, add some height, some climbing spots, some, I don't know, enrichment. Feel free, you are free to do whatever you want with your geckos as long as it's not harming them. So do whatever you want with the baby bins, you know, you can decorate it as much as you want, you can give them as much enrichment as you want, so feel free to do whatever. Add a lot of leaves if you want. But of course, just make sure that they're healthy. And I'd say a lot of people stress about them not finding their food. What I do is I always put the food in the same spot. So when you open the door, I always put it right at the door. So that teaches them two things. That the food is always there, and that when they're hungry, they come to the door. So when I see that they're at the door, I usually can give them a cricket or something, and they go right for it. So I think teaching them things is really important, and they're smarter than we actually think. They learn things based on like patterns. So if you do something over and over again, they're obviously gonna learn that, and they're not a stupid animal at all. You're gonna see that they're not if you actually care for them. They look silly because of their eyes and mouths, and they lick and stuff, and they're really funny, but they're not really silly. I would say don't feed them until 3 days after hatching because they're not gonna eat it. It's not bad if you just put food in there. If they eat it, well, good for you. But they're probably not gonna eat it just because they have to eat their shed first, and then they're gonna have to be hungry at some point, and when they're hungry, they're gonna eat. They might not even eat after 3 days of hatching, maybe not even after a week. I'm not sure, I don't really keep track of this, which it wouldn't be a bad idea to do so. I just don't really keep track of it because I know that eventually they all end up eating. I've never had a gecko of mine die because of not eating or anything like that, so I'm really confident that geckos have the ability to find food and eat it. Then I would say don't hand feed their wet food, but feel free to hand feed the crickets because they're gonna associate that you are kind of food, and then also being out is not a bad experience. Now, hand feeding crickets, I would only do it for a couple of months until they get used to the tongues are food and the tongues are crickets, and then they need to know that there's two different kinds of food. There's the wet food and then there's the live food. The tongues mean live food, and then the little cup, which is always in the same spot, means wet food. So when they feel like eating more of a fruity thing, they can go there and lick it off. And when they feel like eating more of a bug and protein thing, they can just go to the door, walk up to the door, and then they will probably ask for food in their own bowl, which is just waiting there. And then sometimes when I pass by, they try to eat at me or something. And then I also like to always offer just some crickets just in case they want them. A lot of babies, you don't really have to teach them, they just learn. But a good portion of them as well, you need to give them that juice of the cricket leg at first, or the cricket head or something. And then they will learn what a cricket is, and then they will eat it with no problems. When it comes to how good of an eater they are, it's usually a mix of genetics and environment. You can definitely teach them, but there's also some geckos that almost right out of the egg, they're already eating and smelling the cricket and knowing that's food. So just try to teach them how to do that. Also feel free to put some crickets in their enclosure. I don't really do it with these boxes because they can escape through the back, but with the baby bins that I show you, the small ones, the shoe boxes, you can add a bunch of crickets there, and if they're not there and you see poops, that means that they have been eaten. This also leads me to say that you should introduce bugs early on. If a gecko has been introduced to bugs early in their life, they are going to be more likely to eat those bugs later in life, and they're also an important part of the diet. Geckos that eat more bugs tend to be healthier and have better structure and better weight than those geckos that only eat the wet food. Also, the wet food is usually high on sugars. It's not good to only give them that, so variety is key in every single thing when it comes to taking care of a live animal. And then finally, I want to say, wait at least until they're 5 grams before you sell them, or you try to house them differently or something, just because if you are not experiencing hatchling care, or the person you're selling it to is not experiencing hatchling care, it's easier for those hatchlings to die than if they are 5 grams or above. Usually a gecko to be 5 grams, it takes maybe 3 or 4 months. So that's plenty of time for them to learn how to hunt for food, how to look for that food that is maybe the wet powder or the crickets, and how to stay healthier overall. It's just for some reason they live better than hatchlings. Hatchlings are weaker, and the ones that are 5 grams babies are not that weak. So wait, be patient. Also, a pro of doing this is when they are 5 grams, they have more pattern and better structure than when they are babies. Therefore, you're gonna be able to tell which one you like best. And finally, another pro is that you're gonna be able to sell for a little bit more expensive. I see some hatchings selling for like $30, $35 at expos. Just wait 3 months and you'll be able to sell those for $60, $70. Alright guys, that is all I have for today. I hope this video was useful, and if it was, please comment, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.